I'm Stephanie Wilson, and you're listening to Freedom Over Fascism.
So I've been
Mhm.
focused on that because Texas is basically a fascist state already. I think if you live in most of the red states across the country, you definitely have different levels of fascism that are already here. We definitely see the Christian nationalists taking over different parts of our government. But we also have to remember this is a small group of people. We are the majority. It's a small group of people. They are the tyranny of the minority. But we are the majority. But the problem is the majority is that we have to wake up and
Mhm.
actually start fighting back and organizing. And we have to go out there and just say, this is enough. This is not the world we want to live in. This is not the Texas we want to live in. And honestly, as a mom, I didn't sign up for this. I talked to some of the folks and their basic values were very progressive values. But the loudest people in those areas are the ones that are like Trumpers or the ones that are saying like that it's conservative or it's more red, but it's really not. It's just that the far right is so loud and violent that it scares people who are in the middle or progressive from speaking. Because the other side is you don't know what you're gonna get. You don't know if somebody's gonna pull a gun. You don't know if they're gonna be violent. You don't know if they're gonna go after your family. You don't know if they're gonna go after your jobs. You don't know how you're gonna be attacked. We don't know what the repercussions are of dealing with the far right.
Hi, friends. Welcome back to Freedom Over Fascism. Today, I'm pleased to introduce you to Nancy Thompson, founder of Mothers Against Greg Abbott, which is the largest moms movement in Texas, where I'm assured everything is bigger. In our conversation, we discuss the existing fascism in Texas, what it takes to fight it, the fact that we should all be investing more in Texas because the power building is gaining strength, and Texas is at the epicenter of the fascism in MAGA-captured states. Nancy urges all of us to run for state or local office and support those who are currently running because that's the only way to regain democracy. She lays some truths on us about reality, what it's going to take to change things, and how very important the stakes are in Texas. Also, keep in the back of your head that what goes into Texas textbooks is often adopted in most states. So when you hear about Moms for Hitler influencing curriculum in public schools, remember that Texas textbooks and curriculum have an outsized presence in curriculum nationwide. As I mentioned in my latest post on Substack, we are all exhausted. I'm hoping that hearing stories of people doing the work all over the country to regain, protect, or restore freedom and democracy will inspire us to keep going, even when there's another outrage and distraction. And remember, take a break if you need to, because normies will only start paying attention to the election in August or September, even though we're following all the twists and turns so closely. Coming up on Freedom Over Fascism, we're going to hear from a Gen Z organizer working for Newtown Action Alliance against gun violence, a trans activist working in the hoods and holler of urban Kentucky and rural Appalachia. We'll hear from an activist raising money online for national and state candidates across the country. We'll talk to the mayor of a North Carolina city and an expert on Christian nationalism and extremism. I think you'll find all of those conversations inspiring and good reminders of the awesome work that our allies are doing across the entire country. There is something that we should all be really proud of, and that is Florida Democrats' incredible feat of not leaving a single state office uncontested. We talk so much about these reverse coattails and how important it is to contest every race, and it's great to see Florida competing everywhere. If you want to hear more about Florida state politics, go back and listen to my conversation with Fentress Driscoll in episode 36. As minority leader of the Florida State House, she's a force of nature and one of those strong, smart Democrats we know are part of the deep, deep bench of young leaders in the party. Please check out the Substack for this podcast if you haven't already. And please, please, please consider a paid subscription so I can get more and better content to you as we barrel toward the election and continue to fight for freedom and democracy. You can support the pod at www.freedomoverfascism.us. Nancy Thompson, welcome to Freedom Over Fascism.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Well, I'm really glad you're here because I think there's a lot of conversations that we talk around and don't really get into the guts of it. So I want to start just by asking you about what brought you to start Mothers Against Greg Abbott and what's going on in Texas that this is so important.
Well, I accidentally started Mothers Against Greg Abbott, which turned out to be the largest mom and women's movement in Texas. And it all started actually during COVID. Greg Abbott did away with the COVID masking in schools. And during the time that he announced that he was doing this, I was actually in the hospital room with my son, and he was being treated. He had a really bad virus and he was super duper ill. And the doctor said, "You can't send him back to school if they're not going to be masks. You know that, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, this is not going to work out." And I knew that he really needed to go back to school because kids needed to be in school.
Right.
And here's Gray, he got rid of the mask mandate, and I just thought, wow, like, I want the kids to be in school, but we have a governor that's working against us. And I was just done. I just felt hopeless as a Texas citizen. I felt like there was nothing we could do to fight back. And so my husband went off to work that morning, and I said, "Bye, honey. Have a great day." I asked my older kids to take care of my youngest son, the one that was ill. And then I made a poster board and I wrote down Mothers Against Greg Abbott, one line in blue, one line in red, one line in blue, one line in red. And I went and I stood out in front of the Capitol and I protested all by myself. And it was really a moment that was just between me and Greg Abbott. And it had nothing to do with anyone else. I didn't know how anyone else felt. I didn't think it was fair to ask other people to join me in this fight. But little did I know that a lot of people felt just like I did, and it ended up, like, causing a firestorm across Texas, and now we have a very large movement. We have hundreds of thousands of followers in all of our social medias, and we're still growing. I mean, this movement is still growing. Every single time Greg Abbott opens his mouth, the movement grows. And the reason we really do need this movement right now in Texas, well, not necessarily even this one. It's honestly, I think it's many movements across Texas to give lots of other grassroots organizers credit, is that we need change in Texas.
Mhm.
Desperate. But what they're really doing is taking away our freedoms and liberty and putting freedom and liberty as a stamp on it. So it can trick people mentally until they stop and think about what we're giving up in exchange.
Well, that's obviously by design, right? They
One
use words so often and in such, uh, vast quantities that they lose their meaning entirely. I'm not sure who said it, when fascism comes to America, it's gonna be wrapped up in the flag, holding a Bible. It's gonna look a little bit different, but be incredibly harmful, and it's already here. So, I've been talking to a lot of people in Texas, some grassroots organizers. I know there's a lot of people who are really fighting hard. Can you tell me a little bit about Mothers Against Greg Abbott and a little bit about the situation there so our listeners who don't live in Texas and those who do have a better idea of what it is you're facing, and we have a lot of listeners in MAGA Captured America, and it's a little bit of a different flavor everywhere.
Yeah. First of all, I want to say, like, when we originally started the movement, even I at the time did not recognize that what we were basically turning into was a fascist government. But it was over the last 2 years, Greg Abbott has just been going after one thing after another thing after another thing, and what has happened is that the more he attacks everyday citizens in Texas, we definitely have seen a huge trend in Texas that definitely looks a lot like fascism. So, what we've been doing at Mothers Against Greg Abbott is just trying to organize women and organize people to start working together and start pooling our money and our efforts and our energies in the same bucket so we can actually start making a difference out in our communities. And so You may have seen some of our ads. We produce like over 50 ads, actually, probably over 60 by now. What we've been trying to do is harness all of our energy, money, and effort together to go after certain issues and to really go after Greg Abbott and the Texas Republicans. Because when we all work together, we can make a big difference together. We can make an
Mhm.
impact from a run for their money. And that's what we've been trying to do. So we've been trying to do that as well as, to be totally honest, trying to keep people's spirits up because it's really
Mhm.
hard to be a Democrat in a red state when you feel like you're constantly being beaten up. And there's so many people that have been pushing back and trying to fight for a blue Texas for so many years, and Texas still hasn't turned blue, and they're exhausted. I mean, they're super duper
Right.
tired, and they are demoralized, and they feel like, "Gosh, we just put in all this effort. Was it worth it?" And I really felt like I needed to go out to some of these communities and give people hope, something to work towards. After we lost in 22, everybody just felt really hopeless. So we spent all of 23, basically from January all the way through December, traveling across the state, talking people up, convincing people to run for office, talking to them about how they can make a difference. And I pretty much traveled almost every weekend for a year, just about.
So you
And
must be exhausted as well.
I'm definitely exhausted. I've been taking it easy the last couple months because I realized probably in March, not only was I exhausted, I have 2 kids graduating from high school, and I didn't do the things I should have been doing for them. Like, I didn't do the senior year things that other moms get to do. I did not do any of that. Trying to hold up my end of the world here in Texas. In the meantime, I really made a huge sacrifice with my family, and I was really tired, and I just need to take a break. And so right after the primary, I just decided this was a really good time to take a break and take a breather. So I've been really retooling and refocusing and trying to elevate what we do at a much higher level than where we were at before. So I've been
Mhm.
focused on that because Texas is basically a fascist state already. I think if you live in most of the red states across the country, you definitely have different levels of fascism that are already here. We definitely see the Christian nationalists taking over different parts of our government. We see how this is starting to impact our healthcare, our mental health care, our children in schools through gun violence or through just honestly support of public education. This is going to continue. It's going to impact our not just K through 12 education, it's going to impact our upper education, our public universities and colleges. And there's a much, much bigger impact in Texas. We're seeing like the book banners not only ban books in schools, but now they're going after public libraries. Now they're stripping things like evolution out of textbooks. We see them going after public bookstores like Barnes and Noble and things like that. And it's having a big impact. But we also have to remember this is a small group of people. We are the majority. It's a small group of people. They are the tyranny of the minority, but we are the majority. We have to wake up and
Mhm.
actually start fighting back and organizing. And we have to go out there and just say, this is enough. This is not the world we want to live in. This is not the Texas we want to live in. And honestly, as a mom, I didn't sign up for this. Like, we didn't sign up for money to be stripped away from public education. We did not sign up for our children to be attacked if they were LGBTQ. We didn't sign up for some of these things that are happening, but this is what we have, and this is what is happening. And if we don't all band together to fight back, then we're just going to let them win. We
Right.
cannot roll over. This is not a time that we can let them win. This is not a time for us to just see, "Oh, let's just see what happens." Just sit there and have a cup of coffee and don't do anything. This is a time where we have to activate all of our like-minded friends that think like us, that wanna make a difference and want to see change in Texas.
You said that your organization grew very rapidly. And I have always heard and believed that Texas isn't a red state. It's a non voting state, it's a voter suppressed state. And so, have you felt that people are activated or are just completely feel defeated, or yes to all things?
Okay, I'm gonna give you a very honest answer. I definitely, because of my job now, because this kind of turned into my job and my, like, new career as an activist, I tend to be in a lot of places with a lot of Democrats. I'm gonna be totally honest and say that unless they're out there socializing with people who don't vote, they're only listening to themselves, and
Mhm.
they only listen to themselves, and I'm gonna give you an example. When I went down to Hidalgo County, and it is down in the Rio Grande Valley, the RGV area, and majority of the people there are, like, under the age of 36. I mean, they're really pretty young, and they're very progressive, and they have voted some people in office that are not progressive at all. And they feel like they've lost their voice in some areas of the RGV because they don't have these progressive leaders. But then you have people on TV saying stuff like, the RGV is turning red, and the RGV is very, Latinos are very conservative, and they're very this, and they're very that. Well, if you repeat things enough, people start to believe them. But the reality is that majority of the people on the ground, when you talk to everyday people, they tend to be pretty progressive, but they're voting for people, even Democrats, who are really not very progressive Democrats, the people who were elected in these areas. So we need to actually take some of that power back and vote people in office that are going to be progressive and back up on
Mhm.
progressive issues and that are not going to just bend over backwards when Republicans give them attention or when they give them a committee assignment or when they do a special favor for them. I mean, we have to elect people into office that are going to represent the people that live in their district. And I
Mhm.
don't see that happening in some really progressive areas of Texas. And it's a little shocking to me because there's a lot of, I mean, definitely, I thought the RGB was pretty progressive. I did. I talked to some of the folks, and that their basic values were very progressive values. But the loudest people in those areas are the ones that are like Trumpers or the ones that are saying like that it's conservative or it's more red, but it's really not. It's just that the far right is so loud and violent that it scares people who are in the middle or progressive from speaking because the other side is you don't know what you're gonna get. You don't know if somebody's gonna pull a gun. You don't know if they're gonna be violent. You don't know if they're gonna go after your family. You don't know if they're gonna go after your jobs. You don't know how you're gonna be attacked. We don't know what the repercussions are of dealing with the far right folks.
Right, and that's exactly what fascism is. It's the use of violence to get their people in power and keep people in power.
And intimidate,
And
right?
and
Like,
intimidation,
yeah.
and but the use of political violence. So people are too frightened to do anything that makes them stand out. One of the people I talked to last week, his name is Paolo Cremides. He's the executive director of the Outrun Coalition, and they recruit young and diverse candidates to run for office in rural America. And they win often because of their identities and not in spite of them. And I feel like not just Paolo, but there are so many people doing incredible things across the country, but we don't all know about them. And we're not working together and we're not learning from each other. We're not talking to each other. And we need to be doing that. And then we need to be talking to the people that aren't in our bubble, right? As you said, people aren't going and talking to their friends who are non voters. And whether that's because they don't know any, because they have self selected into their own community, or because they're afraid of the consequences. I think I don't have an answer for you, but just clarifying that those of us who want to beat fascism are going to need to be the messengers to the non voters or to the sane Republicans, because there are still a few out there, and not leave it to the MAGA folks or the national media because they're not doing their jobs properly.
Yeah, one thing with the national media, it's like They like the sensationalism of clicks and likes, and so they will put together a headline or a topic area that gets more clicks and likes. Maybe just those types of articles are just better for them because it might be better received, but the thing is, though, is that this is how Trump got elected in the first place in some
Right.
way, and I thought that they would do a better job this second round, but they haven't. I don't think they're doing a worse job, but I don't think they're doing a better job. I do think that there are some good journalists that are pointing out fascism all the time and are pointing out some differences and that are standing up, and I'm very proud of that. I do think that there are some Republicans that are standing up. Of course, there are a few, but at the end of the day, here's the deal. At the end of the day, even a Republican who stands up and says, I don't like Trump, is still going to vote to take away your freedom. So they're still going to vote to do away with Roe v. Wade. It's really frustrating because we need them to vote against Trump, but we're also strange bedfellows. I don't know exactly what the answer is. I wish that some Republicans could see us and find ways to work with us. Your parents used to always tell you, like, mind your own business. Like, can we just go back to that time when people could just mind their own business and, like, if you don't want an abortion, don't get an abortion.
Right.
But you know what? You're not St. Peter at the pearly gates judging people. You need to stop doing that shit. Like,
Right.
just you don't wanna read a Toni Morrison book, then don't read one.
Right.
But don't take it away from somebody. Don't
Right.
take away their right to read whatever books they want. If you don't believe in climate change, then don't. But that doesn't mean we don't stop planning for the future because you cannot believe it, but it's still coming, and chances are you're not gonna have insurance, house insurance when it happens because they're gonna do away with house insurance because of all the storms. If you're thinking ahead, you're doing something wrong. So, like, I don't know how to get through to certain moderate Republicans or reasonable Republicans, but they're not good gatekeepers, and they need to do a better job at their gatekeeping of the Constitution of the United States of America, and also moving the country forward. We don't want to go backward. With each ruling that they take away, we go backwards, we go backwards, we go backwards. While the United States is going backwards because they're taking away all these rulings, we have countries like Singapore that are moving forward. We have countries that are building these amazing, super fast trains, amazing architecture, amazing art, amazing scientific discoveries. And if we lose a lot of the things that make America great, it's going to be because Republicans decided that they wanted to live back in time instead of the time we're in now and to look forward. And that's a shame because I always thought that they were a lot more progressive growing up than it turns out that they are right now. I never really felt like they were gonna hold us back this bad, the difference in parties. A lot of times growing up, everybody said, "Oh, they're practically the same party," but they're not the same party anymore. They're not practically the same, they're not even close to being the same party. But we need people to decide right now, there's only 2 teams. You're either on team democracy, you need to get on board, or you're on team fascism, and that's it. So, like, they need to decide what team they're on because there's 2 teams.
And I completely agree. And there's far right Republicans who want power. That's really it's all about power, right? Keeping other people powerless so you can gain more power and money. And then there's some people who don't get that binary, don't understand that if they don't vote for team democracy, even if they think that they are, standing up for their principles, then team fascism wins. You don't get to protest against team democracy and not reap the consequences. I think that's something that is going to be a big question over the fall, not necessarily in numbers, but in volume. People are like, "Well, I don't like Biden." Well, tough noogies. He's our guy. He's got $200 million in the bank. What do you think's gonna happen if you're voting for Trump? Like, or if you're not voting at all, or you're voting for Cornel West, or you're voting for RFK? Like, what do you think's gonna happen? I think that that's really something important to say. If you stay home, you don't get a voice. And if you're just protesting what you don't like without thinking about the future, as you said, and what the implications are, you don't get a voice. Or you do, but you get a voice to the other side. What do you think would be a good way to break through to people who don't understand that you're either on team fascism or team democracy, and that you need to take action to make it so, and you can't just wait to let other people do it, and you can't just assume that because you vote, that's enough?
Okay. You never know when you vote for the last time it's going to be your last time. Do you think the people in Germany, if they had a looking glass and could see in through the future and they could see Hitler coming, do you think they maybe would have worked harder to fight back against fascism? I think we're really fortunate enough right now that we have Trump, who's an idiot, and they published the 2025 project. We know what's coming. And we know exactly what this looks like. They're going to deport immigrants. They're going to,
Or people who look like immigrants.
or
Like, I don't think
anything.
they're gonna, right?
I don't think
Like,
they're gonna be, yeah, picky. They're just gonna just put people in planes or trains or whatever and get rid of them. Anybody who they feel is not of their quality, they're going to do away with them. Actually deplorable. It's disgusting what they want to do. They're going to completely destroy public education. Completely. That is going to in turn affect our upper education, our universities and colleges, which the United States is known for having amazing universities and colleges. People come from all over the world to go to our colleges. And it is going to really affect the college is going to affect the students that graduate. It's going to affect the future job workforce. It's going to, I believe, cause a recession and economic problems because of all of the choices that they make. But I also feel like a couple things is that we need to fight, organize, and as hard as we can right now to win. Because if we win, we can change the Supreme Court. If we win, we can change Congress. If we win, we can actually start having nice things again. We need to start fighting back and we need to start winning. And it's everyday Americans across the United States that need to band together to fight back. Because what Trump and his team are trying to do, these are not things that benefit everyday people across our country. These are things that only benefit the oligarchs in our country or
mhm.
certain people in our country. They're not for everybody. It's just a small few. And they are definitely very racist. And I'm just fortunate enough to have grown up in a period after the Civil Rights Act to now where we had so much freedom and a lot more equality than we had seen. And I really felt like there was so much progress. If even from the time I graduated from college to now, I really felt like with each coming year, there was more rights given to more people. I saw the expansion of personal freedom and rights. But now you see a lot of those freedom and rights taken back. We don't want that to happen anymore. It needs to stop. And the only way to stop these things from happening is to vote against Donald Trump and Republicans that are running for office and to save democracy. So we need to organize and do that and band together and do that. People always think, oh, it's never going to be that bad. He's not going to do that much damage. Oh, yes, he is. He wants to get rid of the Department of Education. He wants to completely redo the judicial system. It's going to be this bad, and if not worse. And you're going to lose a lot of rights and a lot of freedoms that you have. And people just need to wake up. They need to get organized and they need to wake up and we need to fight back. And I think that certain Republicans need to decide what team they're on. And they need to quit holding people by a type of like accountability. For example, right now in Texas, a few Republicans lost their primary, that they were very pro public ed. So they contacted the Democrats that are Republican and said, okay, Democrats, I'll see what I can do to help you guys win so we can save public education. But then there was this one Republican who was just like, but you have to prove to me that you can raise money. You have to prove to me that you can do this. You have to prove to me that you can do that. So, do they really want to help Democrats save education? Or do they want us to just do hurdle after hurdle after hurdle, us trying to prove ourselves? And I just want to tell that Republican legislator to F off. We have a crisis in education, public education, Texas. You either need to get on our team and be a team player or get out of the way because you can't have both sides. And this is what I mean when they're like Republicans, they are your friends, but at the end of the day, they're always putting up these hurdles and hurdle after hurdle after hurdle. No matter what, those Republicans are always, to a certain degree, vote against democratic issues, always, because they have so demonized the word Democrat and Democrats in Texas. They use it like a curse word. They use it as a cut down. They use it in such a way that it is like a derogatory term here in Texas. We have to push back on that. And we have to realize that if we're going to do this as Democrats, we have to do it for ourselves and each other. And we can't bend over backwards hoping that a moderate Republican is suddenly going to be on our team. I have not seen that. I was hopeful for that in 22. I was wrong. Moderate Republicans at the end of the day will vote for Republicans. There is no such thing as a moderate Republican because they always cave. They always do. And so we need to put more of our effort into broadening our reach where we live and going after the voters who don't vote and trying to help them and going after the low propensity voters. And we need to develop community and relationships with those people to try to figure out why they don't vote, talk to them, reach out to them and get them to vote. If we put more of our effort into those people instead of catering to Republicans, hoping, crossing our fingers, begging them to be our friends when they're never going to be on our side, ever. They're never going to be on our side. We need to just end that pipe dream and put more of our effort into creating a community and expanding our umbrella. And that's what needs to happen. And that is what I don't see happening. And it drives me bonkers.
So, how do we make it happen? We talked to Jeremy Smith of Civitech, who has created this way to identify the non voters who might lean Democrat if they were to vote. We see organizations trying to recruit people to run for office so that we don't give up votes by not running. We've seen people trying to make community online. I've talked to a bunch of rural organizers who understand that rural doesn't equal white and that having people from the community run for office and ask for votes is the best way to actually get votes at the local level. What do you feel in Texas can be done? And I talked to a grassroots organizer who's trying to bring together this coalition. Seems like a lot of people are trying to do this. What do you think it's going to take?
Okay.
I know
It's
I said a lot.
no, I think the answer is it's complicated. It's going to take blood, sweat, and tears. I mean, it's like to sound like Winston Churchill. Here's the plan. Here's what we need to do. One of them is that we need to identify like the other organizers in our county and have meetings and everybody start working together. Two is we need to educate the public. There is a huge deficit. We've had about 30 years or so of no civics education being taught in schools, and it shows in Texas. It shows there's a humongous impact on that. So we need to create authentic people doing civics ed on TikTok, on Instagram, on all of the things, educating people about the simplest thing, like what to bring to the ballot booth when you vote. The things that are intimidating that people are so embarrassed they don't want to ask these questions. because they're basically grown adults and they don't want to ask because they're embarrassed that they don't know it yet, or they might not have learned it, or maybe they forgot it. So we need to think about what all of those questions are and create videos on how to educate people on those things. So there's that. Three is we need actually people who sign up to become precinct chairs and Democratic county chairs. You need to get involved in your local county parties. I think we need to donate to candidates. We need to donate to grassroots orgs and to our local Democratic county party. It's very important to support the county party because the county parties where a humongous amount of work happens that we don't all know about, but a humongous amount of work happens there. So there's that. You should always pick one or two candidates to support. And then honestly, it's like $5 at a time. Give up Starbucks every Friday and donate that $6 cup of Starbucks and donate it to a candidate instead and drink tea that day. It's not going to kill you. Just do something else that day. And if we start like thinking of changing our mindset of how we can use our money for good, organize with people, get together and like make changes, I think we can make changes. But we also, I'm going to say something loud and clear. This election in 24 is not going to be won by hiding behind your telephone, by hiding behind your computer. It's not going to be done on an app. It is going to be done face to face. It is going to be done by you having a human connection with somebody else in your community and asking them to vote. When we did some door knocking for Kimberly Rubio, who was running in Uvalde for mayor, we went door knocking, and a lot of the response we got from people was like, it's just like, you need to ask me to vote. Like she literally wanted us to ask her right then and there to go vote. And then I was like, okay, can you please go vote? Here's the location. Can you please go vote? And she's like, oh, yes, I can do that. Thank you. But she's like, people want, I mean, there's that mentality of some type of people. They want to be personally begged to vote. So here's what I'm going to tell everybody. Put away your ego for the next 6 months. Let's go knock on doors and let's personally beg people to vote.
People do want, like, they don't want to feel taken for granted. They want people to ask for their vote in a sincere way. However, so here's another issue, and I completely agree with everything that you just said. But I want to bring up two different things. One is that you go talk to them, they say they're going to vote, and then they go back to their Fox News and their CNN. And so we need to find a way to be talking to them all the time. And I talked to several people who talk about buying media so that the local media is what they hear and creating for them a different information ecosystem. But that's a long-term plan, right? People like Tara McGowan and Courier Newsroom, they're doing it, but it's not big enough scale yet. And the other thing is when you say skip your Starbucks and give money to a candidate, are you talking about the local and the state legislative or even the nonpartisan school board races?
Absolutely. That's 100% what I'm talking about. The local
Right. The
donate
local
to local
races.
races. I'm going to just tell you right now, there's some big races right now, like, of course, Biden and Colin Allred and all these folks. And I'm gonna lay some truth on here. Some of these big races, and we even saw it in 22, some of these really humongous races raised millions and millions and millions of dollars. And what it did was it affected the down ballot races because so much money was going to these races at the top that the races at the bottom had no money and it wasn't being trickled down to them.
No, actually, it trickles up much better.
Yeah. And because what happens, the trickle up is that if somebody goes in there and they're going to vote for Nancy Thompson, who's running for commissioner in their city, chances are they're going to end up voting for Joe Biden. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But they know
Exactly.
me and they're probably going to vote for Joe Biden, but they are coming in for me to come vote for me for city council. I'm just hypothetically speaking. I'm not running for anything. And that's the trickle up that we need. We have candidates right now that are running in Texas really amazing candidates like Dana Steele. She used to be on the radio and she was a radio DJ, a rock radio DJ. She's amazing. And she is running just to make sure that her opponent has an opponent to make sure
Absolutely, that's
the right
so
one.
important.
And also, she's lifting other people's voices. She's lifting the judges' voices. She's lifting other candidates that are running across Texas, lifting their voices. And it's so important because there's so much teamwork and she doesn't get enough credit that she deserves for doing that kind of work. But there's some folks that are running and they're lifting others in the process and they need to be highlighted more. So there's a lot of that stuff happening. So we definitely need to donate local because the big all-stars, they already get a ton of money. But
Right.
our local people could really use that money and they make it go a lot further. So it's a good investment.
I couldn't agree more, and we talk about that a lot on here, is that what people can do is act and give and talk locally, because that's where people know them, people are gonna listen to them, and where they can really make the most difference, and if we have a lot of people working locally, right, it's gonna filter up. If you vote for Trump and he wins, that might be the very last election. So it's
When
necessary, but not sufficient, right?
Mhm.
Even if we beat him this year, until we beat this fascist movement, we're gonna be continuing to fight those fights. And until we can beat them on the national level and the state level, we're gonna continue to have these fights. So that's that's me and my TED Talk, is that no matter where you live, focusing locally or adopting a different state. I live in Massachusetts, things are great here. I mean, they're not perfect, but we could
adopt
adopt New
yeah,
Hampshire,
in a
adopt
way. Yeah,
a
like
candidate or just an
grassroots,
area, grassroots organization.
like Mothers Against Greg
Exactly.
Abbott.
Like Mothers Against Greg Abbott, and you can donate to them by going to.
You? Mothersagainstgregabbott.com.
So, is there anything that you think our listeners need to know that we haven't already talked about?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I just want to share. So recently, I went to DC. I was there for a political conference. They had award ceremonies, and we won some awards at the ceremonies, but they have all these little training seminars. I went to several trainings, and they talked about democratic messaging. They talked about how to win the Latino vote. We talked about how to organize campaigns, Gen Z vote. Like it was separated out into several different themes. Nearly every single time that somebody brought up battleground states or doing some of the work, rarely was a red state listed, and also Texas wasn't listed as a battleground state, and I have to say, I would just sit there in the audience and watch these slides go up with all the battleground states, and Texas isn't on the map. And then I would go to meetings with a lot of people with that belong in the D organizations, meaning that they're Democrat, blah, blah, blah organization. And Texas wasn't even brought up. And I just want to tell people that if you live in a blue state and, or let's say you live in a red state with a blue governor like Kentucky, or you live in a red state with a decent Republican governor, chances are you have no idea what we are living through here in Texas. It is like nothing you have ever seen before. People moving out of this state because they're afraid that they're being tracked, because their medical records are basically through HIPAA violations. They have been sent to Ken Paxton. They are afraid for their children. They're afraid of their children going at school, being attacked from gun violence, being attacked for who they are if they're LGBTQ. They're afraid of all the different ways that the government in Texas is already tracking its citizens. And they are afraid of the amount of racism that we have here. And that it isn't like it didn't exist because it has always existed to a certain degree, but now it is freely existing. Greg Abbott is saying he's saying that he's supporting white supremacy. And he's getting rid of the rule of law. He just threw that out the window. This is a group of Republicans who always say they're for rule of law, they're for law and order. But yet he just threw that all out the window.
They were for rule of law and order as long as white Christians are on top of the heap.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, exactly. So I like to say to people who live in other states, like, we are not exaggerating when we say like I was telling everybody, I was like, I live in fascist ground zero of fascism. Texas is ground zero for fascism. And then it's like next up is Florida and Tennessee. And then it goes to like Alabama and Arkansas and Missouri and Mississippi. The South is a mess. And what they're trying to do here in the South is dismantle the 14th Amendment. And they're doing it with one court ruling after another to take away all of those civil rights and civil liberties that make up the 14th Amendment. And that's what we see happening. I already see the things that are happening for the next Texas legislature. They're going to go after education for immigrant children, things like that. So it is really important that if people live in a red state, that they don't forget about us. I think that the worst feeling in the world was going to some of these meetings in DC and not seeing Texas anywhere on any of their list of like states they're focusing on. And it just feels like we're forgotten. It feels like no one is fighting for us. It feels like we're forgotten. Everybody already wrote us off. And it makes the work of being a Democrat in Texas that much harder. Texas Democrats deserve support. Texas Democrats deserve funding. Texas Democrats were doing a lot of the work. And certainly both Trump and Biden come to Texas to raise money, and they raise millions and millions and millions of dollars when they're here, but yet they don't invest. There's such a lack of investment here that it just makes me so angry to feel like we have been completely written off. And there's a few of us that are fighting for what is good, but we need more support. We need more attention, and we need to not feel like an afterthought by the DNC and the larger party.
And with that, I think I need to let you go. But Texas is it's such a contradiction, right? It's like ground zero, but it's also ground zero for potential. Like, there's so much potential energy that isn't being harnessed. But one of the reasons is how bad it is, and people are scared. So I hope that after listening to a bunch of these episodes, and after we get off, I'm going to ask you for more, that people will think about Texas, because as I've been told every time, everything really is bigger in Texas. If you could flip Texas, holy shit, like the whole thing gets better and easier.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nancy, for coming on. And I would love to have you again.
Thank you. I would love to be back.
Hey, I'm Alok, the host of Build a Change, a brand new podcast from MacBlue about the people at the center of progress. Join us on a journey across the country as we uncover stories about the everyday folks working together to build something bigger than themselves, real change. You'll hear from students in Appalachia advocating for LGBTQ-friendly books in their communities, healthcare workers providing telehealth abortions across the country, immigrant farm workers fighting for their safety in the blazing sun, and candidates in states with razor-thin margins. Listen to Build a Change now, wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you for listening to Freedom Over Fascism. And thank you to our editor, Benji Wilson. Please join our Patreon at patreon.com/freedomoverfascism. Subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please drop us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts. We thank you for choosing freedom over fascism.